Okay, wonderful agents. We are on the 1 to 4 family residential contract, page 2. Okay, up at the top, there are a list of the exceptions continuing from the page 1 title policy and survey. And these are what's not covered in the title policy. Coming down to number 8, this is the one that is of particular importance. This is the standard printed exception as to discrepancies, conflicts, shortages in area, boundary lines, encroachments, protrusions, or overlapping improvements. What that means is this covers, in this little yellow box, mistakes on the survey. So when the survey comes in, or maybe you're reusing a survey that the seller provided, if for some reason there's a mistake on that survey, perhaps it's an old survey and the fence has been replaced a couple of times, and as it's been replaced, it's kind of drifted one way or the other, and it's either encroaching on our neighbor or they're encroaching on us, So we want to make sure that the survey is as accurate as possible, because that's what your buyer has to work with when they become owners of this property, and they want to start doing things, improving the backyard. They need a good survey, right? So, so this particular opportunity for them is to leave it alone, that this survey, any mistakes on the survey will not be covered. That's what I means. Or II, they select that, it will be amended to read that the shortages in area are covered. The title policy will cover shortages in area, mistakes on the survey, but at whose expense? Somebody's got to pay for it, right? So again, surveys are lender required documents, so I think it's a buyer expense, but that's just me. And the cost, you may be talking to your buyer, you're encouraging them to go ahead and get this added coverage. They go, well, how much is that going to cost? The cost is 5% of the cost of the title policy. So remember, we looked at the title policy roughly in this particular example. The title policy is about $3,200. So this would be 5% of $3,200. So as you can see, it's not terribly expensive. And wouldn't it be a great thing to have, just in case the neighbor decided that the fence was encroaching on their property and that they wanted it moved? Well, it costs money to move fences. And so if you had this added coverage, then the title insurance would help pay for the cost of moving that fence. Okay, that's what that means for your buyers. Okay. Title commitment means that within 20 days after the title company receives a copy of the contract, they'll provide the buyer with a commitment for title insurance. Okay, and they do all the searching, they uncover any liens against the property or anything like that, and they make sure it's all good, and they'll be able to give them clear title. Down to the survey. This is one of the most misunderstood paragraphs in the entire contract, so we're going to spend a couple of minutes with this one. So first thing you need to do when you're writing an offer, I usually have a piece of paper, and I'm making a list of questions to ask the listing agent. Exclusions, I ask them about the survey, and there's some other things that we'll ask them as well as we go through the contract. But one of the things I ask is if the seller has an existing survey. So if you know that, then you can check this box, okay? And then put, a number of days. 5's a good day. If you know they have a survey, then 5's a reasonable day amount of time. But they need a survey and a T-47 that's been notarized. And then you can, now if you represent the seller, make sure you have a survey and a notarized T-47 in your hand when you get an offer for that property, because you don't want that seller to go, oh, well, I'm digging around in the attic, I bet I can find it, kind of thing. It's not the seller's responsibility to provide a survey to the buyer. If the seller happens to have one, it's a courtesy, but it's not required. So it's a lender required document and should be a buyer's expense if the survey doesn't have one or if it's unacceptable. So, but if they don't have one and you get an offer, the listing agent, mark this out, mark these out, and check paragraph 2, which says within so many days, 20 is a good number, after the effective date of the contract, the buyer will purchase a survey at buyer's expense. Buyers deemed to receive the survey on the date of actual receipt or specified in the paragraph within that 20 days. Okay, so if, like I said, if you're a listing agent, you don't have a survey, the buyer's agent hasn't asked you if you had a survey, and this comes in with this paragraph marked, checked, that you've got to provide a survey, you mark that out before you execute this contract, and check number 2 and put about 20 days. Okay? All right, down to objections. Now, what you're objecting to, what your buyer would be objecting to, is if there's some condition which would be on the title commitment or the survey. Maybe they didn't get the survey for the 20 days. Maybe on day 20 they get a survey, or day 15, and they look at it and they'll go, "Oh crap! I wanted to build a workshop in the northeast corner of the backyard, and this survey shows that because of the utility easements, I can't do that." Okay, so this is a conversation that you have with your buyer. What are you going to do with this home besides just live here? Okay, residential use is not necessary. Are you going to rent it? Are you going to build a pool? Are you going to build a workshop? Are you going to extend the patio? Or do you want to build an outdoor kitchen? You know, what do you want to do? Is there something that you want to do? Do you want to run a business where you have work trucks that are going to be sitting in the street? Do you want to raise dogs? Do you want to, you know, and a lot of this doesn't have anything to do with the title commitment or the survey, but if you've written it down here that that's what you want to do, and then you get the HOA documents that says that they can't park, you know, business trucks on the street, then that'll give even though you don't have to give a reason, but that'll give the reason to the seller that your buyer wants to terminate the contract. But this says that if something happens and your buyer can't do whatever is in this space, they can object in writing 5 days after the buyer receives the commitment, or whatever number of days that you put there. Now, if the buyer fails to object, if you don't pay attention and ask, and there's some miscommunication here, and the objection doesn't go in within those 5 days, then the buyer has just waived the right to object. Okay, then you may have to find some other way to get out of it. All right, does that make sense? I would put a number of days in here anyway. Even if they just want to live there and not do one thing, I would still put a number of days just in case something came up. Okay. So down here, abstract or title policy, that's just advising the buyer to have an abstract or title policy, which they would. And then in this last sentence down here on the bottom of the page, so many times people just kind of overlook this, and I know in compliance, these boxes aren't checked. And so a box needs to be checked here. If the property is or is not subject to a mandatory membership in a property owners association. So just make sure you check a box. All right. And that is